So in today's weekly Jinx video, and for those that don't know, every Wednesday we do a Jinx video, whether it's about the lore, the meta, how she's doing in the meta, a certain build, certain matchup, the patch, literally anything to do with Jinx at all, even theory crafting. And it's decided by you actually, commenting in the comment section down below about what you want to see me talk about for next week's Jinx video, as well as discussing the current topic at hand. Furthermore, this video usually acts like something of a discussion thread over on the Jinx subreddit, so if you want to head over there to be able to converse with other Jinx mains, to talk about this topic in this video, or another topic at all kinds of different Jinx players from Bronze to Diamond that you can converse with over there, head over to League of Jinx as well. Now, for today's topic, what I want to talk about after something I saw in my comment section the other day was, can you actually one-trick Jinx to Diamond? Now, for those that don't know, I'm not a Diamond player, at least not currently. I just a really quick long story short, I did my placements, did pretty badly, I got autofilled like half the time. That's kind of more of an excuse than an actual validation or real reason. If I was a better player, it wouldn't have mattered. But that is a little bit of where I ended up. But I haven't really been able to play ranked yet and get back in the grind yet. I've been playing some normals to try and get a feel for some quicker games and stuff like that. So there are better people that could give you this answer than I can. But my job is actually to facilitate things like this and just start the discussion. So I can at least make a video on that aspect. And in my experience from like previous seasons. Now, one of the things I will say about one-tricking any champion is you really have to like playing the champion, and you really have to know their matchups all year round, all meta round, and Jinx is no exception. If you want to be able to play Jinx just period, whether it's in normals even, like whatever and wherever you want to play Jinx, one of the biggest things I think you always have to be able to be the best at is your positioning, because of her lack of escapes and the fact that the Flame Chompers have an arm time. So even if you throw them at an enemy, they're not going to snare them immediately. If you throw them at yourself, the enemy might be able to go around them if you threw them at yourself too soon and the enemy wasn't actually close enough yet to get snared by them. The reason why I bring up positioning so much, it seems kind of bland and generic, of course, because that's something you have to be well with on any AD carry, you would think, right? Yes and no, right? Some AD carries kind of have a little bit more mobility, they're a little bit more forgiving, and they have a little bit more dueling power if they get jumped in a side lane while they're solo split pushing. Jinx does not, meanwhile. Maybe if this was pre-510 Jinx with the minigun, was actually really good at dueling for whatever reason, that would be a possibility. Or if it was on release Jinx, when she could actually out jungle Lee Sin, then yeah, by all means, this will actually maybe not even be a thing. But that's not the Jinx we're dealing with right now, right? The Jinx we're dealing with right now, you could say she needs peel. But I think part of it, even if you have peel, if your positioning is bad, then the peel is going to be for naught because you're going to be in the wrong space still. Your team is going to be blowing all these summoners and stuff to protect you, just for you to still put yourself in a bad position and get killed anyways. Your positioning really has to be key, I think, when it comes to one-tricking any champion, but especially a champion like Jinx with her lack of escapes. Now with Jinx specifically, I think one of the best things about Jinx is that she's a late game insurance card, right? Especially in the lower ELOs, more so than the higher ELOs. The problem, most likely, and this is maybe a bit of a stretch, but for me in my experience, when it comes to low ELO, mechanics aren't necessarily the thing that's keeping bronze players in bronze, or even silver players in silver. Their mechanics aren't necessarily always great, and their mechanics aren't necessarily even always good, but sometimes there are some mechanically decent, I will say, bronze players. And I guess the scale of one of two things, because it has to be the one thing or the other for me is what I'm basing this off of. Either your mechanics are good or your game knowledge is good. And I'm not saying without good game mechanics, your game knowledge will carry you far, but I do think that will carry you farther until a certain point than just having good mechanics. And in bronze especially, one of the things I see often down there is you might have good mechanics, but now you have a lead and you have no way of knowing how to close this lead out. What do you do? What do you do with this lead? Have all this gold, have a couple levels on my lane opponents, what do I do? I'm a mid-game spiking champion, and I just don't know how to take over the mid-game now, and we're gonna lose because, yeah, we blew it, alright, game over. Jinx, meanwhile, is a champion that's like, oh, we have this lead, maybe we didn't know how to close it out, but she scales well into the late game, so if the mid-game goes away, that lead you had might shrink, but the damage you're gonna pump out will not. If anything, it'll get even better, because you'll get more items as you go on. And that too sounds like a cliche or maybe bland kind of answer, But that's just, it's kind of the simplicity of it. That's just the bottom simple line of it is, as a late game insurance card, Jinx is one of the best AD carries as terms of how it gets, because her damage doesn't fall off. She's not a mid-game spiking AD carry. Her damage will be there in the late game, so if you don't know how to close the game out and lower ELO, this is a champion I recommend people playing, because then at least your damage will be there. So if your positioning, which we talked about earlier, is good, and now you have damage, then you should be kind of okay if you can't close out games, because then Jinx will help you close out games with good team fights, critting people's faces off with rockets, and then because you have like a 66-minute death timer in the late game because you ace the enemy team, you can just push in, destroy towers and objectives, which Jinx is really good at, and then win the game that way. You know, some AD carries, not necessarily late game AD carries or auto attacking AD carries, but there are some AD carries that kind of struggle with destroying objectives because they're not really objective destroyers. They don't really rely on their auto attack so much, so when they have damage, it's supposed to be for their spells, which you can't use on towers unless something's changed by the time I'm recording this video and they've actually went, now you can like use like Lucian Q on towers and stuff like that. I don't think so, but Jinx, with her auto attacks and her damage and her DPS speed, can take down towers. So now you ace the enemy team, you go push down some towers, you win the game off of that. So for those two reasons alone, I think it's good to one-trick Jinx, at least in lower ELO. Now, I consider kind of gold and higher ELO, mainly because that's where they give out the championship skin. So that's kind of my baseline for this. So that's where you can either credit me or discredit me if you want to. That's perfectly fine in my opinion. But when you get to gold and platinum, I think it more varies on paying a lot of attention to what you're playing Jinx into and knowing your matchups more so often than not. I feel like in bronze and silver, you do want to know your matchups, but if you don't know your matchups, as long as you handle what you're supposed to do, you'll do fine. One of the things I struggled with in a previous season when I got into silver, I placed in silver 3, and at first I was having a hard time climbing because I was just overthinking a lot of things that you don't really need to overthink on this champion. It's one of the beauties of this champion, to the point some people call Jinx brain dead. It's not that she doesn't take a lot of thought, but she doesn't take a lot of complicated thought to get to work, right? You can actually make Jinx work by just having your skills down in terms of CSing, positioning. And then now we're adding knowing your matchups, because if you know your matchups, you know how you can abuse those matchups, or when you just really need to say, hey, I can't win this lane right now, I need to play safe so I don't feed them kills and deny them gold that way. It can work. It's not always a guarantee, of course. You might be playing Jinx into a matchup that you think you're supposed to win, and like the Silver player, for example, is like a Silver god, so in which case, Silver actually they know how to play Silver into Jinx insanely well, and it's just like a really like surprisingly awkward matchup. So there is that option too. There are exceptions, of course, to everything I'm saying in this video so far, but once we start getting gold and higher, I feel like that's where matchups is going to become the most important thing to know. And so yes, you still can one-trick Jinx at this point. But it's just going to take more game knowledge now than it might have before. Once you get to Diamond, that's going to be an interesting one. I can't really talk on this one too much, and which is why I'm making the video like this, because maybe a Diamond Jinx player will see this and be able to attest more to what I'm about to say. Once you get to Diamond, I think it depends on 3 things. The first is, were you in a pre-made? Are you still in that pre-made? In which case you can count on your support, you have synergy, and there's going to be no of those, oh, I thought you were pinging them because you wanted me to go in with my ult, or I'm Leona, so you wanted me to dive them with the Zenith Blade, and in reality you were pinging them to let people know where they were. Even small stuff like that, where in Diamond that could really cost you, like maybe even the lane, won't happen if you have a pre-made. If you don't have a pre-made, your ability to kind of play with any kind of team comp, not necessarily against any type of team comp, but play with any type of team comp. Flexibility in terms of what you get to play with it with a support in Diamond. At least above Diamond 5. Diamond 5 I hear it's its own headache, but in general, you're playing with Diamond players at this point. If someone is playing like Urgot support, they're most likely a Diamond tier Urgot support. So they're going to know what they're doing, and they're going to know how to maybe try and synergize with you. Doesn't make it always easy, of course, but it does mean that maybe that's not as bad as playing with a bronze Urgot support. And then the third thing would be knowing, I guess, I don't want to say knowing when to not play Jinx. I guess knowing when to be like, if I am going to play Jinx, be really knowing of where in the game you're going to be impactful. I don't know a better way of wording. I guess power spikes would be the best way to word that. I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, an actual Diamond Jinx player, if you're watching this, please be able to correct me. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you want to play Jinx and one-trick her out with a Diamond and then keep playing her in Diamond, understanding that there's certain games that are the enemy team, especially if you're first pick on blue side, they're going to just draft a lot of stuff that's meant to kill you. And if you want to still win anyway, which is obviously possible because you as an in turn are also a Diamond Jinx player, you're gonna have to know when it's like, hey, I can't do anything right now. I can't fight right now with Jinx, but I can fight in about 7 minutes when I finish, you know, X item. Knowing that, I think is probably the most, not that you don't want to know any of this stuff in bronze. If you know all of this stuff in bronze, it'll probably help you climb out eventually. But in terms of 1 trick and 2 diamond, I feel like all of these are necessary by the time you reach diamond. Again, I will leave it up to a more skilled Jinx player to be able to correct me on everything I've said in this video, but that's all for this video. So thank you for watching this far. If you did, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe, specifically comment, so we can talk about people's experiences trying to one-trick Jinx to any ELO, really. If you're still stuck in bronze with Jinx, maybe someone will be able to give you advice about what you're doing to be able to get out of bronze with Jinx. If you're midway, like you're silver to plat with Jinx, and you're trying to get that extra edge to push into diamond, someone could give you advice. And if you're already diamond, maybe call me out why this video was actually 100% trash or something like that. Or maybe be able to educate me or other people of how you got there with Jinx. But that is all for this video. Feel free to share it around as well. Maybe you can get some other people that know some advice that they'd be willing to contribute to this video, or a comment or something like that as well. I don't know which video will be next because life will be quite a mess. So until next time, take care. From the Fire Guy FS, thank you for watching.